Hello and welcome to another scrapbooking process video. Today I am using the Gingham Garden collection from Crepe Paper once again, and it looks like I'm going to use the Pink Fresh Studio Felicity collection, but it's not going to make it onto the page. I wanted to do a pinwheel inspired layout, but because the papers I'm using are single-sided, I decided to go with this shape instead. I basically just did a Google search for pinwheel images, and I found the first one, which did involve folding paper and using double-sided, but this one is just a bunch of triangles put together. I would like my own design to be not as perfect as that, so this is going to be my inspiration for the layout. It's just an infographic, I don't know, some type of a template or something for making a slideshow, but I'm just using it as inspiration. Now, as you can see, I have already divided my background paper into shapes. I did that off screen just to make sure that this would work. As you can tell by the footage, I was live streaming during this. So I just wanted to make sure that this idea was going to work before I did it. So I'm just demonstrating here, even though I've already done it, I'm just showing what I've done. So I found the center point and then I'm just eyeballing it and making a bunch of sections. And they don't have to go all the way to the edge because I'm going to cut them. I have a total of 7 pieces here, and this my little sample image had 5, but I'm going to make mine into 7 just because that's how many fit. I didn't choose it that way or anything. And now what I'm doing here is I want all of these triangles to be a similar shape, but they don't have to be exactly the same. So I'm going down maybe an inch or 2 or a half an inch. I'm making it different each time. And then I am kind of making my line so that it goes from further in on the line to further out on the line so that it's at an angle each time, if you know what I mean. I hope that what I did is more evident by the video than by the way that I just described it, because I don't think I did a great job. Anyhow, as long as you're consistent, you will end up with a whole bunch of triangles that end up looking like a pinwheel. And my apologies for my kitty. I thought that she was going to lay down and sleep for this whole thing, but it became obvious that she was just going to be a distraction, so I had to put her out, poor little girl. Anyhow, so now this becomes my template, and I did number them, and I'm just using the first one that I did. So the one that I'm cutting out is actually not the one that you just saw me make. I did it on the back side. And so I am just cutting this one out because I just liked the way that it looked a little bit better. I drew a little circle around the inside just to indicate which of these corners is the center corner. So I've numbered them so I know which order they go in, so they'll fit together the way that they were. And that little arc on one corner will tell me which of those corners belongs in the center when I go to put that shape back together again. And so I'm just opening up this collection for the first time, and I wasn't really prepared for it to be double sealed like this, but it was. So this is the Felicity collection from Pink Fresh Studio, a beautiful, beautiful collection. I can't remember what year it's from, but it's a couple of years old at this point. And I'm just picking a couple of patterns that I thought might work with this one. I don't know why I stopped and talked about that one for a little bit. So I was thinking about that pink background as potentially being a background for this one. That pink patterned paper with the chevron-y kind of shape on it, zigzaggy shapes. And I'm not going to get too much further before I realize that this color isn't really what I thought it was. So what I really wanted to do was pair this Gingham Garden collection with a bit of a brighter or darker color than what's in it. And so I thought that this pink background paper from Pink Fresh Studio would do the trick, but it's really too purpley for what I'm looking for. So it's the zigzaggy parts that it's too cool of a color for what I'm looking for. I'm going to be scrapbooking a photo of my sister from her wedding, and I thought that that was a good photo that I could just take a circle cut from. So the photo will be in the circle in the center of that design. And now all that I'm doing is I'm going to trace each of these little templates, and I'm going to put a little arc to indicate which one is the center. And I'm putting the number of it inside of that little arc. Now that corner will be covered by the circle that will go in the center of this layout. So it's okay that I'm marking on it. The one thing that I would do differently if I was doing this all over again is I would trace from the back side, because when you're tracing, obviously there's going to be little pencil lines left because I'm not going to necessarily cut exactly perfectly. And so I will have to go back. It's no big deal. I'll just go back and erase the pencil lines. You'll see me do it. But I guess if I wanted to be super efficient and didn't want to do that, then this would be the phase at which you would trace the back side of this. You just want to make sure that you're also flipping your template so that everything will fit together well. If you just do it consistently, if you don't flip your template, then they'll still fit. They'll just fit in the opposite order. And usually I am putting my templates so that one of the straight lines is against an edge, but in that case I wanted a certain set of those stripes, so I just put it there. And so this is a pretty easy way to use up a whole bunch of different pattern papers to use them together. If you had scraps left over from another project like I have here, this is a really great way to get some patterns used up. And also, if you just kind of want a layout that's going to show off the beauty of a certain collection pack, this is a really good layout that does that, because it just takes pretty big swatches of patterns. So I think this is the last one. And now I just have to, I'm going to try to put all those pieces of paper away back into their pack there. And next, I'm going to realize that this paper isn't really going to work. Yeah, I don't like it. I'm going to put it together just to see, but no, that's not what I really want. So for a second there, I thought about going back to the Pink Fresh Studio paper, but what I decided to do instead was to take a couple of the more neutral patterns from this actual collection, from the Gingham Garden collection. And as much as I am on a craft kick that I would like to break myself from, I've been using craft like crazy lately, but I just really liked how it looked on this craft pattern paper. So this is a craft background with tiny little white dotted lines with arrows, and I really, really love this. And so I'm trying to kick my craft obsession, but it just keeps coming back. I can't get away from it, but I do really love the look of craft. So here is this pinwheel all reassembled onto the craft background. It looks amazing. I love these patterns together. This is such a pretty collection, and so different for me. I typically scrap with brighter colors than that. It's a timer I use to remind myself to actually chat with the patrons who are live streaming with me, because I tend to get into the zone and forget all about socializing. I have a little eraser cleaner upper tool from Jet Pens there that I'm using. And as I said, if you had traced these on the back side, you wouldn't have to do this step of erasing the little pencil lines. And I mean, the pencil lines don't look that bad if you leave them there anyways. I'm going to be doing some stitching. So this is my half-size Kenmore sewing machine. It is exactly the same as the Genome Sew Mini, or Genome Sew Mini, which is SEWMINI. And this was an older machine. After it was known as the Sew Mini, they made it again, and it was called the New Home Sewing Machine. And they're basically, all three of these are identical to one another with just slightly different colorations. However, unfortunately, I don't think they make any of these anymore. The benefit of these half-size sewing machines is that they're very, very light. So if, as a scrapbooker, you're moving them around from your shelf to your desk and back and forth, they're very, very light and easy to move around. Also smaller, so smaller footprint on your shelf and that sort of thing. But you can sew on your scrapbooking pages with any sewing machine. You just want to make sure that you're mindful that your needle will get dull quite a bit faster. I'm using gray thread here, and I'm just taking each of these triangles and I am sewing a straight line across all 3 of the edges of each triangle. And again, so I'm double sewing. Just it gives a little bit of a messier look and gives the sewing a little bit more impact on your page. I find if I'm going to go to the trouble of taking out my machine and plugging it in and using it, then I might as well make sure that it has as much impact on the page as it can have. And so I find that going around it twice just makes a difference. If I were using black thread, I might not go twice because black thread makes a pretty big impact. But here with the gray, it's pretty subtle. And so I decided to do twice around on every single one of these triangles. So that means sewing 14 triangles here, basically, because I have 7 pieces. And this sewing machine is, as I said, it's very easy to use and very lightweight. I'm just going to come in a little bit closer. I'm sorry for the bumpy ride that you had there, but I just wanted to give a little bit of a close-up of how I'm doing this, especially around the corners. So when I get to a corner, I stop sewing so that I'm stopping with the needle in the paper. Then I lift up the foot, turn the corner, put the foot back down, and sew again. I couldn't get my camera to focus after I changed the angle like that. So I just changed back to the overhead camera, which I don't like to use for sewing because you can't really see what's happening. So I think I'm going to try to change the angle again and mess around with it, and eventually I'll get it working again. There's different settings and the software is kind of finicky and doesn't really work very well, but eventually once I get it on the right setting, I have to not change it because then that's when it gets finicky. Anyhow, here I am just showing again. I'm stopping, lifting my foot, the presser foot, I mean, not my foot, my body, and then turning it and sewing again. And that's a way to get nice crisp corners. Is sometimes when you're sewing around corners, it can just kind of like end up with a curved edge instead of a nice sharp pointy edge. And even doing this, sometimes it'll go curvy, especially if your thread tension isn't set properly, which mine isn't. I need to go figure that out. My tension isn't the way I like it to be right now. But it still works. It still puts stitches in the paper. It doesn't have to be perfect. I believe that this is my last little triangle. So I'm going to, of course, double sew. So you'll see me go around it twice. And then I will finally be ready to put these triangles together to create the pinwheel shape that I started with at the very, very beginning. So I'm going to put that away. As you can see, it's really easy. I can pick it up with one hand and I just store it on the shelf right to my right. Now, thanks to the little arcs that I had drawn in the inside corners of these pieces, it's pretty easy for me to put these back together. And I'm mindful that that green piece really stands out as very different from the others, so I just wanted to shift it so that it was in the place that I wanted it to be. It also comes the closest to the edge of the whole layout, so I wanted it to just be in a way that it wasn't gonna be, touching the edge. I did find the center of this background paper, of the craft pattern paper from the collection, just so that I can put all of those points at the right spot, and this whole design will lie relatively in the middle of this page. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and the imperfection of this shape is one of the things that I really love about it. So you could have done it either way. You could have kind of figured it out, divided it by 5 or whatever. You'd have to do math to figure out how to do that. Or maybe you could just fold your paper into quarters and halves and whatnot. But anyhow, I just decided to chunk it up and just eyeball it. And I really love the wonky look. So I'm playing around here with my die set to figure out what size circle I can use. I want to include some of the details in this photo. In particular, the photographer had placed Sarah's flower bouquet in a particular spot on her dress. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't cutting that out entirely. And as I attach this washi tape, I'm attaching it so that it's just skimming the edges of the die to hold the die in place on my photo as I run it through my machine. But I didn't want the washi tape to touch the photo because photos are a little bit pickier than regular paper. And sometimes if you put sticky things on it, it will stick and leave some residue. I finally decided to change my cutting mats. I had an extra set inside of my Raskog here. So this is a brand new fresh set of die cutting mats, and I love cutting into them for the first time. I haven't changed my cutting mats in literally years. They were a mess, but they were so messy that they had actually flattened back out again, and they were working pretty well for me. It's just that because I was running a photo through, I really didn't want to get that crisscrossy look that sometimes gets embedded into your papers when you're using a really, really ratty old set of cutting mats. I do want to mat this photo in, I'm thinking white, and so I just went into my stash and grabbed a little scrap of white. This is actually some packaging from the Paper Person kits that I get each month. And oops, I forgot to change my camera angle, but you can see the tiny little version of me running that through my die cut machine up there in the corner. And I just got myself a little white circle that's just a smidgen bigger than the photo. I'm using waffle flower dies here. These are it's called additional circles. So they must have 2 sets, and this is the second set. Now I would like to also basically double mat this photo so that it has a white mat and also a craft mat. And I thought about using some craft paper from my cardstock. I looked in my scraps and couldn't easily find a piece. I'm sure I have some somewhere, but then I decided to try the pieces of craft paper that I just have in my stash, and they were both just not quite the right color of craft. So I knew that there were multiple pieces of the same papers in this paper pack. So I just decided to get the exact same paper for the mat. And so I will attach the photo to the circle and then attach the white circle to the craft circle. And now I have my center of my pinwheel, and it has my sister and my now brother-in-law, and they're laughing and leaning against a wall in the winery where they were married. Now, I grabbed my alphabet dies. This is a brand new set of dies that I just bought. I don't know if it's new to the market, but they're new to me, and they're called Lisa. And I will actually post a picture. One of my patrons very graciously found the link and posted it in our Discord. I live stream with my patrons once a month, and we also do lots of chatting over on Discord all through the month and during the live stream. So the link was posted over there. If you're not a patron, I will show it to you at some point in this video. I just don't know when. Before I go ahead and go to the titling of this, I decided to add some pop dots to the edges of my corners of my paper. And what this does is it just helps the pages have that lift look. And I'm actually not gluing them down, like I'm not taking the backing off of them. I'm just using these pop dots to hold the space, not to actually glue the papers down. And that way, when this project is in my album, if it gets smushed against the pages before and after it, it's still going to hold that space. I'm also going to use the same, I use Stampin' Up! Dimensional adhesive. It's my favorite kind of pop dots. I just like them. And so I'm just going to use a whole bunch of edges and pieces to also pop up my actual photo and the matting that's on the photo, of course. It's going to take me a minute here to get all of the backing off. Then I will make sure everything is centered and place my circle in the middle the best that I can. And now I'm going to use these letters for my title, and my patrons helped me come up with the title. And so that was it's nice scrapbooking with other people around because I can ask for input and advice, and they always give me great ideas. Now I went back to my stash and I grabbed my folder of navy blue cardstock. This is from Stampin' Up. The color's called Night of Navy. And I just pulled out 2 sheets of that. I'm only going to need 1, but I pulled out 2, and I am going to die cut these letters with this blue paper so that I'll have blue lettering. Now, what I'm thinking about doing here, I will warn you that this is a lengthy process because I run into some trouble here. I want to stack my letters, which is something that I've always done with my die cut letters. I love how if you stack them up, especially if you're using a nice dark cardstock like a navy blue or black, they almost from a distance look like they might be chipboard or even foam from a distance. And I just love the texture that it adds. So I am using the title, Finally, comma, Bliss. And I'm going to use a piece of washi tape so that I don't lose any of these letters. They're very tiny. I love that this Lisa font includes doubles of some of the more popular letters, and that way you can really line these up and you don't have to cut things a million times. I do have to recut a few things, but I think only 1 or 2. So I'm just going to chunk up my paper a little bit so that I can easily cut these letters because I'm going to need 4 of each letter. Here they are. They're Sizzix, and they are designed by Lisa Jones, and I believe the font is just called Lisa, or maybe that's her logo. I'm not sure, but I'm calling it Lisa. And I got that at scrapbook.com. It was a fairly recent purchase, so it should be there if you're looking for it. So there we go. I am going to have to take my little paper piecing tool here. This is a Stampin' Up one, but you can get these anywhere. And I am going to just have to knock out each of these letters from the die because they stay embedded in the die. And the dies have little tiny holes in them, so you just poke that little poker through the hole and it releases the paper. And as you can see, the letters just accumulate there on my desk. I'm going to grab a little bowl to put them in so I don't lose anything because they are pretty tiny. I don't want to lose the dots of any I's or the commas or anything. And it doesn't come with its own comma, it comes with a semicolon, so I'm just cutting the semicolon there. As you can see, using the washi tape to hold my dies together just makes them easier to handle. I don't have to worry about keeping track of all those little dies and them not moving around on me. So I really like this process. I normally share my entire process with you folks when I'm making a process video, but I ended up editing this because it's a lot. It's a lot of cutting, it's a lot of repetitiveness, and I didn't want the video to be too long. So I'm going to cut out some of this process, but I'm not going to cut out all of it because I did run into some trouble. So here I am, I've cut 4 versions of all of my letters, and I thought there's a couple of different ways that I can do this. So I thought I'd just play around with a few different ways of doing it. So I have my Xyron X little tool here, which is a sticker making tool these are readily available. You can get them at scrapbook.com. I think you can get them on Amazon, lots of different places. And these will turn these letters into stickers. And so I'm just putting them in. I'm trying to be as efficient as I can without wasting the product, the sticker paper, refill paper. So I'm just sticking them in. And as I do that, it's seeming a little bit fiddly. So I thought, so that's one way that you can do it. Another way that you can do it is you can use liquid glue. And I have these glue pens, which are perfect for this, but that one is dried out. This one is too much. So this one is Aleene's tacky glue, and it's giving me too much glue. It's not going to be great. It's too messy. Ideally, I would like to use a glue pen, but I have 4 different glue pens and they are all dried out. So this one is my ballpoint glue pen, which I adore for these sorts of things because it gives you the tiniest little bead of glue. None of these are working. Some of them look like they're working, but it's not juicy enough. The one that is working is the Aleene's one, which isn't technically a glue pen. It's just a really narrow tube. So then I have this Stampin' Up glue tube that also is dried up. I can't get at the product. It's inside and I can't get it. I'm trying to stick a pin in there and it won't come out. And because I'm live streaming, I don't want to go and address this issue. I think if I soaked it in water, it might loosen up, but I just have to move on because there's people watching and I want to move on. I don't want to hold them up. So what I decided to do for this part is I put a little bit of that Aleene's tacky glue on my paper, and then I'm using a little tool. It's basically a little embossing tool. I'm using that to pick up the glue and put it on. And I thought I'm not going to really like that. It was too messy, like it was leaving glue residue on the letters, and I really don't like it to look so messy. So what I decided to do was just run all of these letters through my sticker maker. This is an important step in making stickers. It's important that you take some type of a tool and you go into all the little nooks and crannies and you just press on that little see-through paper that's over top of your letter stickers. What that will do is it will make sure that you have less of the little webby glue stringy things that end up being left behind on the edges of your letters. So at this point, I'm just going to lay out my letters just to see how they're going to look on the page. They're not layered yet, so they're just single layers. And I'm just writing out finally, putting my comma in place, and then I'll spell out Bliss. Like that. So that's how my title is going to go. I just wanted to make sure that it looked okay before I spent all of this time investing in layering my letters. So as you can see, some of my layers are on that little piece of wax paper that are basically their stickers, and half of them are still on my craft mat and they haven't been made into stickers yet. And I'm just playing with it. The problem with using dry glue in this situation is that you don't have as much of a leeway to really kind of like squeeze and slightly shift the layers so that they're perfectly lined up. So with dry glue, you kind of have to get it perfect the first time. And I do not get it perfect the first time. And so these letters are pretty imperfect. And I think that if I had the proper supplies on hand, my title would have ended up quite a bit better looking. It looks okay the way it is. It looks pretty good. I'm looking at it right now and it's fine. But if you look really closely, which most people won't, so it's all right. But if you look really closely, there are imperfections that wouldn't be there if I had been able to use liquid glue. But that's all right, because the page is done and it looks pretty good. It looks great, actually. I love it. And, it's not always going to be perfect, and that's all right. As you can see, this is a pretty fussy fiddly process, and I wanted to include some of the process just so that you could get a sense of what it was like. And I will edit it because this video is going to be quite long. As it is, I think it's 35 minutes long, which is longer than most of mine. So at some point, you will see that this is edited out. There's my little comma. And there's the B and the L. And now I think I do have to either cut or layer some more letters here. Yeah, that one wasn't quite wet. It wasn't sticky enough anymore, so I just used a tiny bit of wet glue there. And any place that I had used some wet glue, it did kind of ooze out a little bit. So I'm just showing that there is some dimension there. It looks good. I'm glad I did it. It was a really lengthy process. I also have a larger sticker maker as well, but I didn't have to use that today. My whole reason for doing this and buying those letters and doing this today was to have a dupe for the Twilight navy blue foam thickers from American Crafts. And it's a similar font, but it's not quite as blocky. It is a little bit thinner and taller than Twilight, but it is both lower and uppercase, and it's small, which I really like. So I will continue to use this die set of letters. But hopefully next time I will have some proper glue pens to use it with, and we'll see how that changes the process. I guess we'll see over time. Now, my patrons also helped me come up with a little bit of journaling for this. It's not really journaling, it's more of a phrase. And I'm using my Faber-Castell Pitt pen, which I love. It's this purple color, which I adore. And it says, "Love is like the wind, dot, dot, dot. You can't see it, but you can feel it." And this was a suggested caption for this layout because of the pinwheel and the idea of, the wind and the pinwheel, right? And I thought that it was a really fitting phrase for a wedding layout. I am very carefully going back over this. I only have this pen in one width. It's the super fine tip. And so I often like to make it a little bit heavier. And so you just want to make sure that you go over exactly the same place that you've already written, and try to refrain from correcting yourself. Like if your letter looks wonky, I find that if I try to fix it, it ends up looking worse because now I have 2 lines there and it looks wobbly and it's not so nice. So just try to go with it. And if you want to darken your lines, just trace over very, very carefully. But I like how this looks. Now with these layouts that are very patterned paper heavy, I typically like to be very restrained in my embellishing. So I'm not going to put die cuts or stickers or anything like that on this page, but I did want to do at least a little bit of embellishing. So I grabbed my enamel dots, which I store in this 4x6 photo album, and it's like a tall one. And I will talk about this. I think I'm going to make a video about this way to store enamel dots because I do really like it. And I'm basically just taking enamel dots that are navy blue, and I'm going to put them in 3 different places just to guide your eye around the page a little bit and to give a little bit of balance to the other elements that are on the page. I wanted to break up this green because that green triangle really kind of pops out and grabs your attention. So I just wanted to break that up a little bit and guide your eye so that if you kind of went from each of those 3 corners that the enamel dots make, you'll encompass the photo, the title, and you'll kind of be over by the journaling as well. So before I show the photos, a great big thanks to my Patreon supporters, some of whom were live streaming with me for this video. So thanks to them. And thanks to you too for watching. And if you have any comments on this one, please leave me a comment below. And next time that I use this font, I will be using my glue pen, which is what I normally use for this technique. And if you've done this technique, please let me know which glue you've used, because it would be great to get some knowledge sharing going on in the comment section for this one, so that if anybody else wants to give this a try, we can all benefit from each other's experience. So thanks so much for watching, and have a really great scrappy week.